Well, so Possessor Uncut is the unrated director's cut that is the
Oh,
full
okay.
film.
Congratulations, Possessor Uncut, getting a lot of buzz
Oh, thank you so much.
since it premiered at Sundance, and wow, what a film. So basically, these are corporate assassins who take over somebody's body through a brain implant using technology and science. What influenced you to write the story?
So it initially came from a slightly trivial personal place. I was going through a bit of a strange time where a lot was in flux, and I was, in a sense, having difficulty seeing myself in my own life. I was waking up in the morning feeling as though I were sitting up into someone else's life and having to kind of scramble to create some kind of character who could operate in that context, which I think is not a unique experience, actually. And I think a lot of people have gone through something like that at some point in their lives. And so I wanted to create a script based around a character who may or may not be an imposter in their own life, as a way of talking about how we construct character and identities and narratives in order to function as human beings.
Now you cast Andrea Riseborough. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she's just a great actress. Whenever I see her cast in something, I thought, okay, this is going to be an interesting film, because she tends to choose very unique films, especially when it comes to her character.
For sure. I mean, she's an incredible actress and completely fearless and likes to really push herself. So I was very, very lucky to have her.
And Andrea, you've always picked like the most original films. How hard is it to find something that's unique?
I mean, pretty hard, actually. Only because I think so many things are written. You know, there's a very old and staid film language that a lot of scripts and projects subscribe to, and it's not really. It's difficult to find something that's has a unique perspective. But Brandon certainly has that, and all of his work has that.
And for you, Chris, reading the script, were you a little bit blown away? It takes all new level of mind melding.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's again, even just for the part itself, getting to do a part where you're essentially playing two people, you know, in one. I mean, that's pretty rare, you know, and also done in a very artistic and smart way is even more rare. So yeah, I mean, it was like a no-brainer. And
then seeing the name Cronenberg attached to it, I'm sure that's part of the attraction too, being part of another person in that legacy.
I think the thing that really attracted me to this script was his first film, Antiviral, which was really beautiful and unusual and very barren. And kind of unlike anything I'd ever seen before, really. It had these very, you know, it had nods to certain, it clearly revered the best of science fiction work, perhaps. I don't know how to quite describe that, but it was just so innovative and beautiful, his first film, that I was really excited to see how that might translate with this new script.
And to summarize the film, essentially you're an assassin who, there's a brain implant technology, so you can implant yourself into Chris's character, and then you're out to, you know, contract killing. So it's a really interesting concept. And for Chris, for you mentioned you have to play these two different characters, and you can see the difference. So for you, how did you approach it?
Well, you know, a lot of it's there in the script, and a lot of conversations with Andrea and Brandon kind of beforehand, and just kind of keeping track of, you know, which character is kind of at the forefront or shining through in each moment. Mm-hmm. And just to not, and then also just to not fall in the traps of kind of like of constantly being aware that somebody's in somebody else's body. I think it's important to kind of trick yourself and trick the audience at the same time, to kind of keep guessing who's there.
Now, did you guys get to work at all with each other? I mean, there's one scene where maybe I thought you guys could have worked together, or never met.
We did probably not as much as we would like to, but we actually did do quite a lot of work together in the sense that we would shoot and then reshoot the same scene, and Brandon would pull one of us out and put one of us in.
Oh, okay.
You know, and all of that cutting, he hadn't necessarily decided which parts he was going to take, so we would often play out the same scene but separately. But it felt very much like we were working together. It was almost like, okay, you know, you come off, I'll take over from here, and then I would come off and you would take over. You know, it was nice. I very much felt like we were working together, even if we weren't in scenes together.
Right.
Yeah, very much.
Now it's interesting because the women here, they're not very maternal, which is very refreshing. And she has to practice at being maternal. So
yes.
It's very different. So what do you know, as an assassin, what are you saying as far as her character? Like she has to go beyond the emotional and just be kind of this robotic. She's almost a robotic.
In some ways, but I think also it's a kind of conflict between, on a certain level, who she is and what's expected of her. She has this sense of violence in her and this aspect of her character that doesn't really work in the context of a kind of conventional domestic life. And so she's at odds in some ways with how she's developing internally and at this job where that is sort of, I was seeing her as being to a certain degree like a drone pilot who's suffering from PTSD, but at the same time, it's also very much in her fabric and who she is. And then that doesn't really fit in the context of a kind of conventional civilized life.
And you also get the sense that the technology is also sort of warping her mind. It's like she's
Absolutely.
ever changing, right? That science comes with a price. Or technology.
For sure. There's a strain involved in the machine, and it's this duality to her existence is also being exaggerated by the technology.
Yeah, I think for Voss, she's that's her job, like many others in this world. She's paid to kill people, but she has really lost any sort of sense of herself, and has traveled so far toward the lives of others that there's no real semblance of she can't. I think she finds it very difficult even to feel, and so she can only really feel life through killing.
And that's what's interesting is she has a son, but she has to practice at being a mother. Like there's no motherly instinct in there, like it's gone. And this brain technology, it kind of just warps your mind, or it's making her less emotional as she moves on, right?
She's desensitized and not a massive fan of the word, but dehumanized maybe. You know, she's gone through a lot of, you know, she's essentially just a walking case of PTSD. You know, she can't really connect to herself or anybody else. And the memory of what she was is very, very far away. Mm-hmm. All of her assets have been used for destruction.
So it's a kind of a futuristic society, but not so far advanced. And the cinematography just use very muted colors.
There are, I suppose, a number of aspects to the look of the film. Part of it is just aesthetic. I like the kind of darkness to it, and we were trying to convey a particular mood, but there were rules that we also created for ourselves that had to do with the narrative. So for instance, when she's outside the machine and in her own life, the entire film is handheld and the focal depth is a little deeper and the lighting is a bit rougher. And so it has this kind of this harshness and this unsettled quality that's matching her subjective experience of being in her own life where she doesn't feel comfortable when she's in the machine possessing people and living their lives. And she that's where she wants to be and has this kind of sense of safety. It becomes a more conventionally cinematic film. There's no handheld, it's all Steadicam and dolly. It's a much more shallow depth of field and so on.
One of the really interesting things about the way he makes film is that he's very analog. You know, so a lot of things that, if you could even say that about somebody's filmmaking style, but he's very, everything's really happening, you know, and which is wonderful because it's tangible. As an actor, it's wonderful because it's happening around you a lot of the time. There are often some effects that you don't understand, you know, that are happening, that will happen sort of outside of what you're shooting, but a lot of it is sort of real and you can touch it. And he's lived and breathed this his whole life, and that's very, very clear. Yeah. He's had the resources to be able to test it out, and he's brilliant. He's brilliant. He's just so naturally predisposed to creatively capturing something, a new idea visually that is totally innovative, and often uses quite old technology. Mm-hmm. And that was the interesting thing, you know, the way that Brandon shot the film technically reflected what the film was, which is that it was set in a world that was like ours but in the past. And you know, he used a lot of old and new techniques together.
I had to go into a rabbit hole because it's called Possessor Uncut.
Yes.
I think originally it was Possessor and then they added the Uncut. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, so Possessor Uncut is the unrated director's cut that is the full film. But there is also a cut version of it that exists that will likely end up on some platforms that wouldn't put out an unrated film. So it's to distinguish the two versions of the film.